So as we saw, those were some generic configurations that we can run from inside our BIOS. Depending on the BIOS version that you have, there may be more, there wouldn't be usually less than those unless you had an older computer and say it didn't support virtualization at all. You may not have that option even in there. But a newer version of your BIOS may have a more interactive display with a lot more options that you can control, a lot more granular control. But those are some general ones that are good to know for especially the A+ exam in this situation. So let's say another situation that can arise is your computer gets stolen, or your computer's in a lab where you don't want people being able to mess with the BIOS much. You don't want people to go in and change the boot order on a computer in a lab. You want it to start up from the hard drive. You don't want people putting in their own disks and starting it up. So you need to lock down that BIOS. Well, both the computer getting stolen and locking down the BIOS, those all come into play with BIOS security options. Now, when we talk about locking down our BIOS, options that enable this are supervisor and user passwords. These are passwords that you can put on your BIOS which prevent people from making changes in your BIOS. You have your supervisor password, and that's going to sort of be your ultimate authority over your BIOS. You enter that, or you set that password, and then you later come back and you enter that password, and you can get in and you can make the changes that you need to in your BIOS. Once you have a supervisor password set, you can also set a user password. A user password, or rather a user on the BIOS, is given permissions by the supervisor. And the user can only make, say, certain changes, or they can only view settings in the BIOS, or you may not want to give users access to the BIOS at all. And let's say in the case of the lab scenario where we had earlier, that may be the best thing. We want to set a supervisor password where only our tech support can get in there and make changes to our BIOS, and then no one else can. We don't want students going into the computer on the lab. We don't want employees going into the computers that are at their desks and changing information on the BIOS. So we set those passwords, only give them to tech support, and no one else can change the BIOS or even look at the information if we don't want them to. Now, in the case of our computer being stolen, now these are really measures that we take before the computer is stolen, of course, but there's certain settings that we can put on our computer that assist in that situation. Say our laptop is taken, or even the desktop is taken out of the desk and hauled away. Most everyone has heard of things called LoJack, which a lot of people may get it on their car, where if your car is stolen, then you can tell the company that installed it and they can actually track where the car is located. They have similar software for computers. Now, this is actually software that's installed on the operating system on the computer, but in the BIOS is what's called a persistence module, which means that if someone steals your computer and then they go in the operating system and they remove that software, the persistence module will go back and reinstall that the next time the computer is turned on. Certain options in the LoJack may be actually finding the computer the next time it's connected to a network or the internet. It can allow us to remotely erase information that's on that computer, or it can even give us information as far as, again, where the computer is located based on the IP address, removing everything on the hard drive, and keeping our information out of the hands of people that we really don't want it in. Another option, configuration that's in the BIOS that really falls under security, it would be our TPM, also known as our Trusted Platform Module. The Trusted Platform Module is essentially a chip information on the BIOS which holds security keys, encryption keys, and we can use that in the BIOS to encrypt passwords and encrypt information on our computer. And all the encryption keys and everything is actually stored encrypted on the BIOS, which newer computers, a lot of them do have it, and it's a requirement for programs such as, or applications such as BitLocker on newer computers. So those are going to be some of our configurations and settings for our security in our BIOS. And hopefully this information can be used later on when you need to make configuration changes, and hopefully, especially in the case of our security settings, you'll have those set up before an event happens, and you'll be able to use those to the best of your advantage.